In the 23rd century, most citizens on Earth are living below the poverty line. This is why many people end up accepting very dangerous jobs like mining, military, and space exploration. To travel through the universe, explorers use a system called slipstream, which turns matter into a data signal and transmits it to a fixed coordinate. All the volunteers are given an Apex device fused into their nervous system in order to use this slipstream. Newbie Whit is getting ready to start a new job at the West Coast Search and Rescue Team. Before he leaves, he and his pregnant wife Lisa share a sweet moment together, and Lisa gifts him a picture of them with a loving note as a lucky charm before kissing him goodbye. Later at the West Coast Slipstream Division, the team gives Whit a very warm welcome. The captain makes most of the team head out, then right in front of Whit, he begins asking Dave about the jump he's made because he's noticed something weird in the logs that may indicate a dirty jump. Dave just dismisses it as a silly mistake. Suddenly, an announcement comes through saying squads 14 to 28 must get ready to jump. The captain puts up a video feed of the jump and notices how the teams are going blind into a mining site. After just a few seconds, only a few team members come back, and to everyone's shock, they're screaming in pain and horror, not to mention the blood dripping on their faces. An alarm is raised because apparently quarantine has been breached, and when the doctors try to help the bleeding rescuers, one of them starts to shoot everyone. The captain, Dave, and Whit try to leave the room, but they find the door locked because of protocol. They watch on the screen how little by little every team member that came back becomes violent and attacks each other. Soon the bullets are piercing the walls and almost hit the trio. For the sake of their safety, they have no choice but to jump, even if the jump only mentions a location called Infini that is off the grid. Dave doesn't want to go because that's where the crazy ones just came from, but soon the lockdown protocol begins filling the room with gas, meaning they must jump or die. For some reason, the captain's Apex cannot decipher the code, so only Whit and Dave manage to jump while the captain is left behind to die. Moments later, the East Coast Central Command is in complete chaos with the news of what's happening in Infini. The chief puts together a search and rescue team and explains the situation to them. Infini is the furthest outpost in the galaxy and is known for the worst space disaster in history where 1,600 workers were killed by a very volatile mineral that can only be found on that planet. Because of this, Infini was permanently shut down, and a team was sent to investigate what happened. However, an accident caused all the team members to die except for one named Montali, who painfully removed his Apex to stop headquarters from forcing him into jumping back. Now Montali plans to send a huge amount of a dangerous mineral to Earth, so the team's mission is to go there to stop him. At that moment, news of what happened on the West Coast arrive, since squads 14 to 28 had been sent to extract Montali as well. Apparently everyone in the West Division has died except for Whit, who has been trapped in Infini for a week already because of time dilation in space. They also think there's an airborne threat in the station. Then the team proceeds to jump and instantly appears in Infini, finding the place in complete ruins and freezing. The team immediately jump on the mission by assigning duties. Boxon and Jackler have to find Whit, Menzies, Grenick, and Kent have to look for the payload, and Mannings, Huntington, and Captain Johansson will find the generator. As the team begins exploring, they find a huge amount of bodies around every room and hallway. Half of them died of the freezing temperatures, but they can't tell what killed the others. Eventually Menzies' group finds the payload and begins working on the control panel as they wonder exactly what is powering this section of the station. Meanwhile, Johansson's group finds a dead man with weird lumps coming out of his neck that they can't identify. Then they finally find the generator, and while Huntington starts fixing it, Mannings goes to check the surroundings. When he enters another room, he's horrified to see abandoned experiments using human skin and various body parts that are still hanging around. At that moment the generator begins working, and the computer system reboots, only to be replaced by a dark screen that asks them, "Who are you? And what are you doing here?" Getting a hunch of who this may be, Johansson explains they're here to rescue Whit, and this causes the fans to start blowing steam into the rooms and the station gets locked down. Mannings is locked inside the room with the experiments and has to watch how everything unfreezes and begins dripping blood. Suddenly Boxon's team finds a door that opens on its own to reveal Whit coming out of his hiding spot. Afterward, Whit lifts up the lockdown protocol and the team regroups with him to hear him out. Whit explains he had to make sure this team wasn't crazy like the others, and that the station has become a slaughterhouse. Apparently what's behind all the deaths is some sort of infection that is passed from person to person by blood and causes them to go berserk, which is how all the miners killed each other. Whit has already tried to return through Slipstream, but he failed and stayed hidden in the ducts, where he blew up the external vents, killing everyone in the station for his own protection. Huntington asks how Whit is powering the station, so Whit explains it runs on binary codes, which he understands. This makes the team wonder if Whit can shut down the payload, which makes Whit angry because he realizes the team was sent for the minerals, not him. Jackler cuts in and calms Whit down, promising to take him home if he helps them first. Whit immediately begins working at the computer and easily finds the payload, however to shut it down he'll need someone to go to the furnace room to force the override. Menzies volunteers, so Johansson sends Jackler and Grenick with him. Then Whit asks the team to look out the window, and they discover there are dozens of windmills powering up the station. Moments later, the trio makes it to the furnace room and activates the override for Wit while they discuss the families that wait for them at home. Wit immediately begins working on shutting down the payload, and Huntington can't help wondering if he's infected, but Wit swears he isn't. When Wit finally kicks off the overriding procedure, an alarm begins ringing, and Wit asks Menzies and Grenick to turn the valves off. The gauges aren't working and the computer warns them about an imminent meltdown, but with Wit's careful instructions they manage to shut it all down safely. The team gets ready to regroup, but suddenly Montley shows up and attacks Johansson with an axe. The squad immediately pushes him away and Mannings quickly knocks Montley down with one simple shot. Next, the team tries to find medical supplies to take care of Johansson's wounds while Jackler and Grenick hear the commotion on the comms, so they decide to go back while Menzies stays behind. Huntington and Wit don't want to help Johansson because they're worried about the infection, but Mannings orders Huntington to join them. At that moment, Montley reveals he isn't dead and attacks Mannings, who struggles against Montley until he manages to blow his head. This causes Montley's infected blood to splash all over the place. The infection immediately begins affecting everyone, making them scream in pain and insanity. Wit concentrates and manages to fight against the side effects before reaching for the comms to tell Menzies to hide. Afterward, Wit runs away and jumps across a huge gap to reach the other side of the station, only to slip and fall through several floors. For a few minutes, Wit sees Lisa worrying back at home, but then he wakes up and discovers he survived the fall thanks to the infection. After throwing up, Wit hears a voice and realizes a crazy Kent is hunting him because he blames him for the death of his teammates. A chase begins through the station as Kent continues to insult Wit, but when he's about to finally find him, Jackler suddenly shows up in an absolute berserk state and attacks Kent, beating him to death. Wit stays hidden and waits until Jackler is gone to pick up Kent's gun. Moments later, Wit finds a laboratory and looks for medicine for the infection, to no avail. After taking a moment to concentrate again and fight back the violent impulses, Wit keeps looking around and finds a bunch of research that reveals that the dangerous mineral is actually a frozen organic parasite called primordial ooze. Its basis instincts are predatory, and that's why infected people go wild. Only people with advanced emotional stability are capable of resisting the infection, otherwise it spreads fast. This parasite wants to be the alpha cell and can replicate any organic matter they infect, so with enough time, it could replicate a whole human being. Lastly, the man behind all this research turns out to be Montley. After lots of reading, Wit hears a strange noise and goes to check it out, only to suddenly be jumped on by Menzies, who had been hiding in a closet. The two men struggle for a while and Menzies doesn't let go of Wit until swears he isn't infected and explains what happened. Menzies stares at the research and reaches the conclusion the entire planet is a living entity, but only when it's thawed. The parasite isn't capable of understanding and is just looking for the alpha among them to survive. There's no cure for the infection, their only hope to survive is to go home. However, only Johansson and Huntington can call headquarters, and Johansson is probably already dead. During their talk, Wit has to fight back the infection trying to gain control again and Menzies gets suspicious, but Wit swears it's just a wound he got when he fell. Wit and Menzies agree to go looking for Huntington and they begin discussing how to tackle the search, only to be interrupted by Mannings suddenly bursting in through the glass door. Mannings begins attacking Menzies without mercy, so Wit points his gun at him to make him stop. However, Mannings threatens with shooting Menzies to make Wit put his gun down. Then Mannings begins throwing a tantrum, complaining about having been sent here just to save stupid Wit and saying that it can see Wit. After lots of ranting, Mannings gets ready to kill Menzies, but Menzies and Wit remind him he's a friend and that they have families at home. Mannings says everyone has a choice and decides to end things for himself, causing some of his blood to fall on Menzies' face. The infection immediately starts driving him crazy, so Wit has no choice but to shoot him before he gets aggressive. Meanwhile, Huntington wanders around the station while struggling against the infection as well. Moments later, Wit starts hallucinating and sees himself going through a berserk rampage. He concentrates and manages to send the hallucinations away, but his eyes are starting to get red. Afterward, he hears a voice and discovers Huntington recording a message for his family. Apparently he's resisting the infection as well. Wit points his gun at him, asking Huntington to take him home, but Huntington ignores him until he finishes recording his message. Then he explains he's already called headquarters, they just need to wait 8 hours. This makes Wit worry because the lab research said nobody could make it longer than 2 hours. As time passes, Wit and Huntington slowly lose their minds to the infection. They start talking nonsense and jump from one emotion to the other, including laughing like manias, screaming, and even threatening each other while they argue. Eventually Wit gets tired of waiting and decides to go to the medical bay alone. Meanwhile, Grenick is using her medical knowledge and trying different methods to cure herself. When she looks in the mirror, she sees some scutes growing on her back, explaining the weird neck they saw earlier. Suddenly Jackler shows up, revealing his arm has weirdly mutated. He comes closer to Grenick and tries to kiss her as he promises to protect her, but Grenick keeps him at bay because she's scared. Then Jackler asks about their baby, forcing Grenick to confess she had to do an abortion on herself to lose the baby because the kid was already infected. Hearing this makes Jackler go berserk and attack her, but Grenick fights back. Back to Wit, he's having trouble opening a door, but Huntington shows up and helps him. They make it to the medical bay and can tell what just happened because the parasite shows images in their brains thanks to some sort of hive mind. Jackler is dead, but Grennick's still alive, so Whit asks her what they can do against the infection. Unfortunately, Grennick thinks the parasite is too smart and the only escape is death. Then she says goodbye to her mother and dies. The lack of hope causes Whit to start losing control again and his eyes go completely red. Huntington points his gun at him, but Whit defends himself and a fight ensues. After lots of struggling, Whit manages to run out of the room, prompting Huntington to chase him. Before he can be found, Whit jumps into a hole with a ladder, and Huntington discovers the parasite is on the ladder as well. After interacting with the parasite and getting his eyes fully red too, Huntington also jumps into the hole, only to be ambushed by Whit. Another fight ensues, during which Huntington gets even crazier, and both men exchange blows as if they were invincible. Eventually they fall into a small pool of water and Whit manages to overpower Huntington before tying a hose around his neck to break it and kill him. Afterward, Whit clings to Lisa's picture to gain strength and goes to the med bay to find a scalpel and record a message for the parasite. He explains that its technique is awful for survival because by tapping into people's hatred, the parasite is only making them kill each other and it'll never learn anything about humanity. However, if the parasite had chosen to work together with them, they could have helped each other. Then Whit talks about his family and how everyone here just wanted to have an honest job, causing him to start seeing visions of the team and Lisa. With the picture still in hand, Whit finishes his message by ending things for himself. As Whit's message plays on a loop all over the station, the parasite begins covering all the bodies with its gooey minerals. A mysterious puddle forms with the minerals and a human face appears on it. While this happens, Whit's blood starts coming back into his body. Moments later, Whit wakes up without a single wound and is shocked to discover the whole team is also alive and well. Mannings informs them the parasite is gone, and Whit checks the lab, where he confirms all the mineral samples are gone too. The team cleans up and regroups at the control center, but nobody knows how to explain what happened. Obviously disturbed by the experience, they all agree to lie and say they were incapacitated for a few hours because of pressurization. The payload is destroyed and they've rescued Whit, so the mission is completed and they shouldn't have trouble at home convincing everyone they shouldn't return to this place. 5 minutes later, the team gets ready to slipstream back to Earth, but right before jumping, Whit sees 5 humanoid forms made of minerals, and one of them has his picture. It seems the parasite did hear his advice. Then the jump kicks in and the team makes it back to Earth, where everyone is panicking. A group of doctors immediately surrounds them and asks them personal questions to be sure they're sane. They also ask if they were exposed to any dangerous contaminants. The team swears they didn't, but everyone is put through a scan anyway, and they all pass it with colors except for Whit. The scan can't seem to read him, so the chief asks him again if he was exposed, but Whit doesn't answer. Thankfully, the scan finally works at that moment and clears Whit out. Then the team learns that here on Earth only 52 seconds passed. Afterward, Whit returns home to reunite with Lisa, who immediately begins crying because they had told her Whit wasn't coming back. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.